Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Sunday, 3rd August 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Israel's military conducted an overnight operation in southern Syria, seizing weapons and questioning suspected weapons. Traffickers based on intelligence. In Gaza, at least 27 Palestinians were reportedly killed by Israeli forces while seeking food, and 6 more died from starvation or malnutrition, sparking widespread condemnation. Witnesses reported Israeli forces firing on crowds at a food aid distribution site. 15-year-old Abdul Rahman Abu Yazar was shot in the eye by Israeli soldiers at an aid site. The family of Israeli hostage Aviatar David, held by Hamas in Gaza, reported he is being starved, citing a video showing his emaciated state, and urged Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire. Hamas stated they are open to coordinating with the ISA to deliver food to Israeli captives in Gaza if Israel halts airstrikes and opens permanent humanitarian corridors. Ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas have stalled, leading U.S. and Israeli officials to consider an all-or-nothing Gaza deal as pressure mounts on Israel regarding the hunger crisis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing for a military solution due to the inability to find a diplomatic answer to the hostage crisis. Across the West Bank, Palestinians protested the Gaza war, displaying images of those killed or imprisoned by Israel, and those depicting the hunger crisis in Gaza. Experts suggest Israel's demolitions in the West Bank are aimed at displacing Palestinians, with this year's demolitions exceeding any year since 1967. Western nations are discussing Palestinian statehood amid concerns over Israel's policies in Gaza. Separately, Israel informed Syria that it opposes the presence of Syrian soldiers south of Damascus. The conflict has drawn international attention, evident as tens of thousands protested Israel's war on Gaza in Sydney, Australia, raising the possibility of Australia joining other nations in recognizing the state of Palestine. In the United States, US envoy Steve Witkoff met with Israeli families amid growing outrage over a video of an emaciated captive held by Hamas. Allegations have also surfaced that ICC prosecutor Karen Khan was threatened by then Foreign Secretary David Cameron with the UK's withdrawal from the court, allegedly stalling a top prosecutor's Israel case. Russia experienced a series of significant events, including a Ukrainian drone attack on an oil depot near Sochi, resulting in a large fire that required over 120 firefighters to extinguish. Regional Governor Benjamin Kondratiev reported that a 2,000 cubic meter fuel tank was consumed by the blaze. A 7-magnitude earthquake in Kamchatka triggered tsunami warnings, and what Russia claims to be the first eruption in over 450 years of the Krasheninnikov volcano, though other sources say it has been dormant for 600 years. The Russian and Chinese navies conducted joint artillery and anti-submarine drills in the Sea of Japan as part of scheduled exercises, according to the Russian Pacific Fleet. Russia is also expanding its control over the Internet by mandating the pre-installation of the state-sanctioned messenger service Max on new smartphones sold in the country, starting in September, raising concerns about potential restrictions on WhatsApp and Telegram. Former envoy Witkoff will travel to Russia next week to discuss Russia's war on Ukraine, according to Trump, who says again he wants a deal where people stop getting killed. On day 1257 of Russia's war on Ukraine, Ukrainian forces launched a drone attack on an oil depot near Sochi, southwest Russia, in response to Russian attacks on Ukrainian territory. This is part of a series of Ukrainian strikes targeting Russian oil and gas infrastructure. Meanwhile, in the United States, some Pacific islands will receive relief from US tariffs, while others will face an increase from rates initially announced in April. Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour discussed US tariffs and NC changes. A former U.S. soldier suspected of killing 4 people at a Montana bar is still at large and may be armed after escaping in a stolen vehicle. China and Russia have initiated joint C-2025 naval drills in the Sea of Japan, near Vladivostok, Russia, lasting 3 days, involving submarine rescue, joint anti-submarine, air defense, anti-missile operations, and maritime combat exercises. China has rebuffed US demands to halt purchases of Russian and Iranian oil, even as both countries aim for a trade deal to avoid tariffs. Domestically, Chinese solar giants have reduced their workforces by 1/3 due to overcapacity and weak demand. Smaller Chinese oil producers are set to double their output in Iraq to 500,000 barrels per day by 2030. Footage indicates that China's Fujian carrier successfully completed a fighter jet catapult takeoff drill. Guangdong province reported 2,092 new cases of chikungunya fever last week, primarily in Foshan and Guangzhou, prompting local authorities to promise decisive measures to control the spread. Chinese scientists have developed a super steel for nuclear fusion, capable of withstanding extreme conditions, and have also unveiled Darwin Monkey, a brain-like computer comprising over 2 billion artificial neurons. Additionally, a joint Chinese and Canadian study revealed that earthquakes power a hidden ecosystem beneath the Earth's surface. Russia, in collaboration with China, commenced joint C-2025 naval exercises in the Sea of Japan near Vladivostok, featuring submarine rescue, anti-submarine, air defense, anti-missile operations, and maritime combat drills over 3 days. Iraq is witnessing a surge in activity from smaller Chinese oil producers, who are projected to double their output to 500,000 barrels per day by around 2030, increasing their presence in the region. The United States and China remain engaged in discussions, though disagreements persist regarding US demands for China to halt purchases of Russian and Iranian oil, even as both sides seek a trade agreement to avoid tariffs. New Zealand's Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters has cautioned against over-reliance on China, emphasizing the importance of diversifying international relationships. The UK government is preparing to evacuate seriously ill and injured children from Gaza to the UK for NHS treatment, funded by taxpayers. Domestically, high street banks are experiencing a £100 billion deposit outflow as customers seek better savings rates from online rivals and building societies, reducing traditional banks' market share. Millions of UK drivers may be eligible for compensation from an £18 billion car loan compensation scheme due to the FCA redress program, with payouts expected in 2026. The UK's Online Safety Act, aimed at protecting children online, has faced criticism regarding potential censorship. Turning to Ukraine, the nation has claimed responsibility for a drone strike on an oil refinery in Novokhybershevsk, Russia, roughly 1,000 kilometers from the border, evidenced by a large explosion at the facility. In Kyiv, arrests related to corruption in military procurement have been made, following President Zelensky's reversal of efforts to weaken anti-corruption agencies, amid protests against legislation impacting their independence. Pope Leo included the young people of Ukraine in his blessing for the Jubilee of Youth, remembering those in countries bloodied by war who could not participate in the celebration. Meanwhile, Russia faced a Ukrainian drone strike targeting an oil refinery in Novokhybershevsk, about 1 km from the border, causing a significant explosion. Shifting focus to China, Scientists are using insights from the war in Ukraine to improve drone technology, aiming to increase their resilience against air defenses with the goal of achieving a 90% survival rate. Finally, in Gaza, the UK government is set to evacuate seriously ill and injured children for NHS treatment under a taxpayer-funded initiative, building on a prior private effort. Pope Leo also remembered the young people of Gaza, as well as Ukraine and other countries bloodied by war. Japan's financial markets reacted negatively to recent economic data from the United States, causing a significant drop in the Topix index and Nikkei stock average. Competition for talent is intensifying among securities firms, with medium-sized companies raising starting salaries to rival industry giants. Agricultural policies are undergoing a major shift, as Japan plans to eliminate rice output restrictions by ending government subsidies, encouraging farmers to limit production. Japan is actively investing in its cultural sector. Initiatives include training non-Japanese craftspeople to sustain traditional crafts. Furthermore, Japan seeks to establish international protocols for removing hazardous space debris, aiming to protect vital space infrastructure. In other news from Japan, the government issued heatstroke alerts across several prefectures. Controversy surrounds the planned screening of a Chinese film depicting the Imperial Japanese Army's Unit 731. A survey revealed that a majority of foreign visitors to the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum disapprove of the U.S. atomic bombings. The World Cosplay Summit 2025 in Nagoya saw a team from the United States emerge victorious. A Thai individual is seeking to repatriate the remains of Japanese soldiers. India is under renewed scrutiny from the U.S. for its ongoing procurement of Russian oil, with White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller alleging that these purchases are effectively funding Russia's war in Ukraine. Despite facing a 25% tariff imposed by President Trump, India remains committed to its oil imports from Russia, which account for more than one-third of its total oil consumption, as Indian leaders insist on making their own energy supply decisions free from American interference. Furthermore, aiming to curb brain drain and position itself as a global education leader, India is seeing the establishment of foreign university campuses, though some analysts believe the advantages will be most visible in larger cities. Capitalizing on patriotic sentiments after a recent 4-day conflict with Pakistan that resulted in over 70 fatalities, Indian filmmakers are actively acquiring movie rights related to the event. The United States, led by President Trump, is strongly criticizing India's continued importation of Russian oil. Stephen Miller, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, accused India of financially supporting Russia's involvement in the Ukraine conflict. President Trump has imposed a 25% tariff as part of the pressure on India, viewing it as key to influencing Putin's actions. In the United Kingdom, the test series between England and India is approaching its climax, with England needing just 35 more runs to secure victory in the 5th test. The series was intensified by an oval downpour, following centuries from Harry Brook and Joe Root, and a subsequent flurry of wickets. China is the focus of an urging for Modi to visit both Beijing and Hong Kong's cross-border workers. Australia's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, plans to contact Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Labour MP Ed Huzik acknowledged underestimating the strong public sentiment against Israel's Gaza actions, highlighted by a large pro-Palestine march in Sydney. Forensic Services Queensland repeated a significant testing error affecting evidence in thousands of criminal cases, including rapes and murders. A review revealed that hundreds of rape victims have waited over 12 months for rape kit testing. In NSW, a 26-year-old Chinese woman is missing after being swept away by floodwaters in the Hunter Valley. Meanwhile, Victorian police are investigating 5 incidents targeting the Melbourne Hebrew congregation synagogue by an individual in a screen mask who spray-painted offensive phrases. Yemen is grappling with the aftermath of a tragic shipwreck in the Gulf of Aden, where a vessel carrying approximately 150 migrants capsized. The UN's migration agency reports at least 68 African migrants dead, with 74 still missing. Many of the migrants were Ethiopians hoping to reach Gulf Arab countries, seeking refuge from conflict and economic hardship. This recent disaster underscores the perilous journey undertaken by tens of thousands annually as they navigate dangerous waters in search of better opportunities. Shipwrecks off Yemen's coast have claimed hundreds of lives, highlighting the urgent need for safer migration pathways. Pakistan is bolstering ties with Iran, affirming its right to peaceful nuclear development. Pakistan's Sharif hosted Iranian President Pezeshkian, solidifying commitments to enhanced security and trade relations, targeting $8 billion annually. The two nations signed agreements spanning the energy and trade sectors during Pezeshkian's two-day visit. In other news, Pakistan claimed to have downed an Indian fighter jet using Chinese-made missile technology, citing an Indian intelligence failure. India faces escalating trade friction with the United States, as Washington has imposed a 25% tariff on Indian goods, adding to existing import taxes, citing trade barriers and continued purchases of Russian oil and weapons. In a military setback, India also suffered the downing of one of its fighter jets by Pakistan, employing Chinese-made HEL-15 missile technology. The United States is seemingly recalibrating its foreign policy approach, exemplified by President Trump's apparent Pakistan pivot, which is creating ripples in the dynamic between the U.S., India, and Pakistan. Further complicating matters, the United States has imposed a 25% tariff on goods imported from India, in addition to existing import taxes, citing trade barriers and continued purchases of Russian oil and weapons. United Kingdom, aiming to curb channel crossings, the UK Home Office is injecting an extra £100 million into border security, leveraging a returns agreement with France. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper detailed that the funds will facilitate the deployment of up to 300 more National Crime Agency officers, the adoption of advanced technologies, and strengthened intelligence operations to break up human trafficking operations. At the United Nations, Foreign Secretary David Lammy spoke about Britain's historical involvement in the establishment of Israel, citing the Sykes-Picot Agreement, a pact between Britain and France widely seen as fueling Middle Eastern tensions. New Caledonia. Former president of the New Caledonia Congress, WHAM, has voiced strong disapproval of the recent political accord finalized in Paris. He argues that the agreement fails to sufficiently meet the needs or guarantee the pro-independence authority desired by the Kanak population. South Korea is actively removing loudspeakers from its border areas, signaling a move to de-escalate conflict under President Lee Jae-myung's initiative to foster better relations with North Korea. This follows the mutual halt of propaganda broadcasts that were previously a source of heightened tensions along the demilitarized zone, separating the two countries. Brazil witnessed large pro-Bolsonaro rallies across several cities as supporters voiced their backing amid allegations that the former president attempted to subvert the 2022 election. Jair Bolsonaro is currently facing legal proceedings regarding his alleged role in a coup plot. Demonstrators also expressed admiration for Donald Trump, acknowledging his support for Bolsonaro's efforts to pressure Brazil. Syria is currently grappling with renewed sectarian clashes in Suwaida, a southern region of the country. These recent confrontations have tragically led to 4 deaths, according to a security source. The source also noted that armed groups have violated the ceasefire agreement in this predominantly Druze region. Just last month, similar clashes in Suwaida resulted in hundreds of fatalities. State media has confirmed these violations of the truce, indicating that tensions remain dangerously high in the area. Chile mourns the loss of 5 miners who perished in a tunnel collapse at the El Teniente copper mine. This is the world's largest underground copper mine. Operations were halted following a seismic event on Friday. Approximately 100 individuals participated in the search and rescue efforts. New Zealand authorities arrested a 27-year-old woman for allegedly ill-treating and neglecting a child. A toddler, was found inside a suitcase in the luggage compartment of a bus in Kaiwaka. Turning to the Cook Islands, Tina Brown, an opposition party member, is against complete independence from New Zealand. She instead supports enhanced self-sufficiency for the Cook Islands. Philippines President Marcos Jr. will soon visit India to discuss maritime cooperation with Prime Minister Modi. Several agreements and MOUs are expected to be signed. In a related move, the Philippine and Indian navies have begun joint patrols in the South China Sea. This occurs amid increasing tensions and recent clashes in the disputed area. The Philippines is strengthening defense ties with allied nations in response. Nigeria is grappling with escalating insecurity as gunmen abducted over 50 people in Siban, Garin, Damri, Zamfara state. This incident is detailed in a UN conflict monitoring report highlighting the shift of banditry towards organized crime. Meanwhile, in Lagos, a church community has been formed to provide religious services and support for deaf individuals. Saudi Arabia has resumed executing individuals for drug offenses after a nearly 3-year suspension that started in late 2022, with 8 people recently executed on drug charges. Simultaneously, Saudi Arabia, working with Russia and 6 other OPEC members, has increased oil production by 547,000 barrels per day, a move that will likely impact global oil market. Kenya is seeing continued calls for justice in the Agnes Wanjiru case. The niece of the deceased Kenyan woman has cast doubt on the sincerity of UK Defence Secretary John Haley's promises. She believes his April statement of full support for the investigation was primarily a political maneuver. Singapore is currently embroiled in a scandal as billionaire Ongong Bangsang admitted guilt in a gifting controversy, potentially facing a 7-year prison term and a fine. Meanwhile, Japan is experiencing a surge in tourism, particularly at the Fuji Rock Festival. This event is drawing significant numbers of overseas visitors from countries such as Singapore, Greece, and even the state of Michigan, all captivated by the music, the natural environment, the unique atmosphere, and the freedom to dance. Let's begin. Starting with Ukraine. The conflict with Russia continues to escalate, with intensified fighting reported in the eastern regions. President Zelensky has urged Western allies for increased military aid, specifically air defense systems and ammunition. Negotiations between Ukraine and Russia remain stalled, with no major breakthroughs reported recently. Millions of Ukrainians remain displaced, both internally and as refugees in neighboring countries. Moving to Russia, President Putin has signed a decree to increase the size of the armed forces. The Russian economy is showing signs of strain due to international sanctions. The government is working to redirect trade flows towards Asia and other non-Western partners. Dissent within Russia is being suppressed, with increased restrictions on freedom of speech and assembly. Shifting focus to China, the government has announced new measures to stimulate economic growth following slower than expected performance in recent months. Tensions with the United States remain high over trade, technology, and human rights issues. China is expanding its diplomatic influence in various regions, particularly in Africa and South America. The country continues to grapple with outbreaks of COVID-19, implementing strict lockdown measures in some cities. In the latest from the United States, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates again in an effort to combat inflation. President Biden has signed several executive orders related to climate change and clean energy. The midterm elections are approaching, with both Democrats and Republicans vying for control of Congress. Debates over immigration policy and border security continue to be prominent. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau's government is facing increasing pressure to address rising inflation and housing costs. Discussions are ongoing regarding expanding trade relations with countries in the Indo-Pacific region. Canada is also grappling with the impacts of climate change, including wildfires and extreme weather events. Indigenous reconciliation efforts remain a key priority for the government. Focusing on India, the country is experiencing rapid economic growth, but also faces challenges related to poverty and inequality. Prime Minister Modi's government is promoting policies to attract foreign investment and boost manufacturing. India is playing an increasingly important role in international forums, particularly on issues related to climate change and global security. Relations with neighboring Pakistan remain tense. Examining developments in Brazil, President Bolsonaro is seeking re-election, with the election campaign becoming increasingly polarized. The Amazon rainforest continues to face deforestation challenges, raising concerns about environmental sustainability. Brazil's economy is showing signs of recovery, but high unemployment remains a concern. International pressure is mounting on Brazil to address human rights issues, particularly regarding indigenous communities. Finally, in Australia, the government is implementing new policies to transition towards renewable energy sources. The country is also strengthening its defense capabilities in response to growing geopolitical tensions in the Indo-Pacific region. Australia is working to deepen its trade relationships with countries in Southeast Asia. Discussions are ongoing regarding constitutional recognition for Indigenous Australians. Papua New Guinea anticipates a visit from New Zealand's Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon. This visit marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Papua New Guinea and New Zealand. Luxon's presence underscores the enduring partnership between the two nations. Malaysia's solar panel manufacturing sector, once a global leader, has significantly contracted after the United States imposed tariffs. Only 2 manufacturers remain operational. This decline exemplifies the potent influence of US trade policies on international economies. Bangladesh still bears the marks of its turbulent past, as evidenced by Habibur Rahman, a survivor of the revolution that followed the ousting of autocrat Sheikh Hasina a year ago, who carries physical wounds from the violent period. Cambodia found a cultural beacon in Kong Ne, a blind lute player who survived the Khmer Rouge regime, and played an essential role in revitalizing traditional Cambodian music for a younger audience. China finds itself intertwined with Italy as Chinese mafia groups are locked in a struggle for dominance over Prato's clothes. Hanger manufacturing, a market valued at approximately €100 million, $115, as well as the broader apparel transport industry within Italy's fast fashion center. Cook Islands are facing a cultural challenge, as the Culture Secretary warns that Cook Islanders are showing decreasing interest in their native language, emphasizing the urgent need to recognize its value. El Salvador's President Bukele is standing by his decision to eliminate term limits, pointing to strong domestic backing for his campaign against gangs, which has drawn criticism from both international and local human rights organizations. Germany is stepping up its commitment to Ukraine by increasing investment in the production of weaponry, particularly focusing on the development of long-range drones. Mexico witnessed a deadly prison riot in Veracruz state, resulting in 7 deaths and 11 injuries before authorities were able to restore order. Norway faces the task of modernizing its extensive network of over 2,000 lighthouses to align with contemporary standards. Retail giant Puma, under the leadership of its new CEO Arthur Holt, aims to overcome the perception that the brand is inexpensive and trailing behind competitors like Adidas and Nike. Turkey became the site of tragedy for a United Kingdom citizen, Martin Lachman, a 38-year-old British man from Milton Keynes, formerly a teacher and later a defense contractor, died in Istanbul after falling ill while preparing for a hair transplant procedure. The United States capped off the Swim World Championships with impressive performances, including a record-breaking swim in the women's 4x100 medley relay. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.